Welcome, everyone. This is the Wednesday morning series, and if you're watching this, if you missed out on Monday night's webinar, Troy Love also joined. He's subbing in this last Monday, but also 2 weeks from now he is going to continue. Monday night was core beliefs and some of the problematic core beliefs that we carry, and how we can work on adjusting those, changing those to a better, so that we can learn to love ourselves. But the next one will be on shadows of shame, and so all of that is a continuation of attachment wounds. And we have a long webinar. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's long because we stayed late, and did questions, but we answered them all, and so join us in 2 weeks. Okay, so Troy, without further ado, oh, I've never been on a webinar that you've been on, but I've watched many of the recordings on YouTube. All of the work you guys do is incredible on here, really helping me along the journey. Thank you for that. And that's what they're for. There's so much junk out there. So I will give a tiny bit of history. Dr. Rob is a social worker, and when we started all this stuff called Seeking Integrity, he was committed to, and we followed suit of having resources that would reach people regardless of whether they were able to come to residential treatment, et cetera. So we have an expert residential treatment program for men who are struggling with sex addiction, porn addiction, intimacy disorder, and many have co-occurring something, whether it's substances or gaming, gambling, whatever, food. So we're looking holistically at all that. That is the one thing we do in person. Everything else is online. And yes, we have people from all over the world, that are plugging into the resources. And and we have experts like Troy Love that come on and share information so that you're getting good information, not the junk that is, kind of anecdotal and hurtful. Like, there's a lot of stuff that'll keep people stuck. So that is not our goal. We want to have people be able to move through this, and we have lots of experience along these ways of things that work and things that don't work. So we would rather help you have things that do work. But thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you're here. Join more. There's more. And you heard me say about Troy coming back, but there's lots of other, people that are sharing great content here. Okay, Dean here in recovery. I learned that you can't ever move forward unless you disidentify with your victimhood. Can you speak on how to disidentify with your victimhood? That's a great question. I've never heard it put quite like that. Disidentify.
Yeah, I love it.
Hmm.
So you, Dean knows me. We talk about attachment wounds all the time, right? And that's what we talked about on Monday. So these wounds are the things that have happened to us, the bad things that have happened to us. And as I was really developing the Finding Peace model, one of the parts that made me nervous was identifying with these as my identity.
Mm,
Um, because I can at least become very much a victim in all of this. I was abandoned, I was rejected, I was neglected, and that goes into the core beliefs that then we end up believing about ourselves, that I'm not enough, I can't trust other people, I'm powerless. And so if I identify with and continue to stay in that victim energy, I'm not going to grow. So uh, I call it the transcendent model, where we at the beginning we're down here at the bottom, and we are victims. Like, bad things have happened to us. I was bullied, I was sexually abused, I was um I was neglected sometimes. So that those are things that happened. And early on, when we have these things happen, it's really normal to be here and to feel powerless and to identify that I'm not enough. But during that time, we're hoping is that there'll become an awareness. Awareness of the wounds, awareness of the stories, awareness of the shame that kind of wraps itself around all of that. And then we move up. And I describe it like I'm on a spiral staircase. I'm starting to move up to the next level. And as I do that, I'm starting to get rid of that victim energy and move into the ownership level, which is identifying, well, I have also done that to other people. I have also rejected other people. I have probably neglected other people. I may not have done it to the extreme that happened to me, but I have done things intentionally and unintentionally that have caused harm and created wounds in other people. And so that level is an awakening of like, wow, like we are all human. We all have wounds. We all suffer. Um, so me playing the victim really doesn't serve me or anybody else. It doesn't help me be a better human. It doesn't let my light shine. And so continuing to identify as that is going to keep me stuck. And so as I start to own, like I have contributed to the suffering in the world, I have contributed to the heartache in my relationship, maybe equally or at least to some degree as much as my partner has. And then as I continue to become aware of that, I have the opportunity to move up to the highest level, which is the transcendent level, where I I start to really own my values and I really start to own my worth, and that becomes aligned. My behaviors come become aligned with what I actually believe. And I live in integrity, which is what seeking integrity is about. I am living in integrity and I'm able to own when I make a mistake, and I don't let shame beat myself up about it anymore. I'm able to own that I've done things that cause harm and do it in a way that is healing. I'm able to own that, hey, I still have work to do. There's still some of my wounds that hurt, and I need to do some wound care around that. And all of that will not happen as long as we stay in the victim energy. I sit on the board of an advocacy uh, center here in Yuma, and we were updating the mission and vision yesterday. And the word that they had been using is we support victims, and we changed that to victims and survivors, because what we want to be able to do is identify, yes, you walk in that door as a victim of domestic violence, as a victim of sexual abuse, but by the end, we want you to have changed that narrative. I'm a survivor. That doesn't define me anymore. So that's what I'm hoping happens for all of us.
Yeah, that is great, and I agree with you. Like, it's not minimizing what has happened, but we have to, acknowledge that. But the stuck is that becomes my identity rather than that happened to me, and I'm going to choose. I often share. Dr. Eddie Caparucci did a webinar quoting Dr. Gabor Mate, that what has happened to us, we can't make it unhappen. And so all of those things that have happened are true. And, but what we do today and how we move forward, that's the re-traumatization. If we're hanging on to that and we're, focusing on that. And I often share with people too, it's like, when you're driving, you glance in the rear view mirror, but if you've got your head craned around and all you're doing is focusing on the rear, what's behind you, you're going to have an accident. Like, it's going to wreck your present and and future. And I love what you're talking about. Like, I have also caused. I think of it often. I have to think of it often because I can get like it's the typical somebody driving and they do something stupid, and I'm immediately thinking that they're idiots and morons, and then I remind myself that every now and then I accidentally cut someone off, and so the gracious assumption is something else was going on in their mind, and whatever, we didn't have an accident, and I'm gonna let it go. And it's not about, I don't know who they are. Like, it doesn't even matter. It's about, do I want that negative energy in me? And so sometimes, yeah, they cut me off. I've done the same thing inadvertently, So it's like one of those things. Can I just go, this has happened. I'm going to let that go. Easy to do when it's driving, very difficult when it's betrayal. And I get that, but that helps me remember I get to choose how I'm going to act. I get to choose how I'm going to react, in any given situation. I love that you changed the language on that because, yeah, I mean, like getting stuck, in as a victim, I like survivor and I like better thrivers. Like there's a
Oh,
lot of people that move through and I'm like, I'm just not going to be a survivor. I'm going to thrive. I'm going to learn how to do this thing called life, regardless of what has happened to me. I personally think you're a thriver. You've come through lots of things and you have shifted relationships, you've grown, you help lots of people. That's thriving. That's not just hanging on by a thread. So a little editorial. Okay. All right. I'm talking about being the betrayed victim, how harmful it is when your emotions and experience of being betrayed is downplayed or ignored by the betraying partner and others. How do you continue to heal and survive when you are pushed in a direction that you are also the problem?
mm. And unfortunately, that happens a lot.
Yes.
Um, so first, it is really harmful, right? And that's one of the reasons why betrayed partners have a hard time even speaking out and sharing their experience because they do get shamed, they do get blamed, um, and so that's really, really painful. So, and that's part of the reason why having some betrayed partner groups is helpful because you go there and they they understand. Now I know that not everyone's perfect, and there have been some times where in any group we are in, there are some people who are really angry, and so. But what we hope is that you'll find groups that work for you and are your people. So that's one of the things is finding your people. The other is, as I've said, and it's hard work, but as we look at those wounds, especially betrayal, what have I come to believe about myself? And we look at that and think, okay, well, you know, I am enough. I am enough. This wasn't my fault. Um, but we don't often experience that. We feel the shame, we feel the embarrassment. And so part of that is when as you step into your truth that you are enough, not that you're perfect. I mean, all relationships have things that can be improved on both sides, but that you are enough and that you matter and you are worthy of love and belonging. When you can step into that energy, it's almost like a deflector shield. When people start to point fingers and blame you, really what Brene Brown defines blame as is our attempts to get rid of our own pain and our own discomfort. And so when somebody's blaming us and I'm in my light, I can see that for what it is. Oh, you are hurting and you're trying to pass that on to me. And you know what? I'm not going to take it. I know that you're hurting and I'm sad that you're hurting and I hope you figure that out. And I'm trying to be supportive, but I'm not going to absorb that energy anymore. I know that I am worthy of love and belonging. And the Stephen Stosny, a therapist, teaches that the more that we embrace that, the easier it is to have boundaries. In fact, they just naturally happen. So when you're pushed and when you're blamed, recognize first that's about them, not about you. I know it doesn't minimize the pain. I know it feels incredibly lonely. And then reach out to those people in your life who don't do that. And I'm hoping you have some. And whether that's groups or a person at church or in your community or a friend, like reach out to the people who actually see your pain and hold space and can remind you that you're loved so that you're not feeling that all by yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I just threw a whole bunch of resources in the chat. But Melissa from Wetonglin came on and did a webinar, and she created a community of female betrayed partners, and she monitors to make sure that is accurate. But she was on our drop-in groups, and if you haven't been on one of our drop-in groups before, please join us. But those are are created to be a safe space. They're separate for the betraying partner than from the betrayed partners. But that community having that reality check. I also threw some in like gaslighting and boundaries, and Debbie McCrae's creating safety with boundaries, and this guy named Troy Love, he did one about uncouple my identity from his behavior. Like that's challenging, but that's a really gift to yourself if you can go, that's his behavior, that's not about me. All of those are just useful tools, but yeah, at some point it's I have to understand that I am not going to betray myself by letting someone else say those things to me. Debbie McCrae talks about internal boundaries. I'm going to take care of myself. You talked about the shield. I often do this, the Kevlar. I've got this Kevlar thing, and it's protecting me. And if somebody is showing that they are safe and trustworthy, then I'm going to let them into my space. If they are not, man, that shield is going to be up. I don't need to have that, and that's me taking care of me. It's not about someone who is untrustworthy, unsafe, hoping that they'll behave. And then it's always, we talk about real recovery takes 2 to 5 years. If you are waiting to be okay until that person hopefully gets a clue, that's a lot of waiting and hoping, without evidence. So the more you're able to step into it and go, I'm going to take care of me regardless of what you're doing. You know, I am okay regardless of what you're doing. It's hard. I'm not saying this is easy. That's why you need support, and getting we do support sessions. They are not therapy. Those I'll put a link for that, but those are 25 or 50 minutes. People, I do some, but my colleagues do as well. And those are just a place, come talk to us, get some resources. We'll give you qualified professionals in your area, whatever you need that can help support you on this journey. So, okay. And then the next one, Dean is asking, can you elaborate on turning your victimhood into a sacred wound?
Yes. So,
Yes.
uh, people ask me, and maybe they've asked you, like, if you could push a button and it would remove all of the bad things that have happened to you in your life, would you push it? And there was a time early on in recovery that I was like, heck yes, where is the button? I don't care how much it costs. Give it to me. I want to push it. I want everything to be taken away and I will be uh, fine. I'll be free. I will be okay. And gratefully, there was not a button for that. Because as I look back now, um, I feel emotion coming up. When I look back and I think about the neglect and the rejection and the abuse and recently some betrayal that I've experienced too, um, it's so painful and it hurts. And I wouldn't not want to have had it because it helps me become more compassionate. It helps me become more empathic. It helps me become more understanding, less judgmental, all of those things. It has helped me become the man that I really have wanted to be my whole life. And so I am I'm grateful for those. Do they get hit sometimes? Yes. And one of the questions is coming up in a minute. I'm going to talk about that. But do they get hit? Yes, they do. And I know what to do about it now. And I'm able to recognize it when it happens in somebody else. I recognize it when I've created that in somebody else and want to take ownership right away and not hide and minimize and go into shame. Like so I'm grateful that I've had these things. So to me, they are now sacred wounds because they've taught me how to love better.
And I agree, I'm there's no easy button on any of this stuff. And I have always said, Everything I went through got me exactly where I am now. And I'm grateful for that. And I've needed all of those things. And I've been able to use lots of painful experiences, to help other people. And that is my passion. And I would have never cared about any of this stuff when I was in my active addiction. I didn't. I didn't care about other people. It was all about me. So to have that shift and have that be so meaningful and important in my life, I'm grateful for that. And yes, like you, have been betrayed. I have trusted people that have proven themselves to be untrustworthy. And the easy thing would be to go, yeah, I'm going to quit doing that because that gets, that hurts. And I go, I will continue to put myself out there. I will continue to make mistakes with trusting people that aren't trustworthy. And I will get burned from now and then. But there's all of these other amazing people that are trustworthy that I get to be connected with that I would miss out on if I quit, if I quit choosing to connect and be vulnerable. So I'll take it. I know there's always going to be pain, but there's also the joy of it. So, okay. The next one, I love what you're saying. I look at the past, and although I don't know about cheating, I allowed disrespect. I own that and know if I had better boundaries, I would not have allowed that and moved on. However, I still slide back into feeling sad about what happened. However, can I continue to move forward? Or probably
So
how
yeah,
yeah, thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. So sadness is part of this journey, right? So we look at when the wounds get hit, the core emotions are going to get stirred up. And there's three of them: anger, fear, and sadness typically get stirred up when we're hurting. And so it's normal that you're going to feel sad. Sadness comes from a sense that I've had to say goodbye to something that I maybe didn't want to say goodbye to or wasn't ready to say goodbye to. And so there's grieving around that. I have a sad song playlist and I will use it a lot uh, when I want to feel sad. I want to give myself permission to cry and sob and all the things. I turn on my sad song playlist and I sit in a room with the lights dim and all that stuff. Do I do it all day long? No. Do I do it for 30 minutes or whatever? Yeah, and I will cry and I feel better. So knowing that, so when you say you're sliding back into feeling sad, I don't know if that's sliding. That's just being human, right? And we're grieving and we're saying, oh man, or I'm sad that I don't have this in my life anymore. And we grieve it. And then I wipe my tears and I will usually reach out to somebody or go get a hug from somebody. And then I will continue to move forward and continue to do the work of knowing that I'm enough and that I matter. Emotions are okay. And as I do that, I will be able to have better boundaries. So please don't let shame judge you into saying that you're not allowed to feel sad or it's not okay. That's not slipping. That's being human. So I love that you are also taking a look at, you know, I think I could have maybe owned some things on my side of the street that I didn't. I love that. That's really healthy. So we just move forward and we start to be in alignment with our values and our behaviors and what is right for us. So I just love it.
I do too. And yeah, I was thinking, could you have had better boundaries? Sure. And I know that that those of us that struggle with compulsive behaviors are very good at manipulating and gaslighting and everything else. So it's always hard to hold those, especially with somebody that when you don't know and you're, like this is my partner. This is, we're here together doing life together and all of that kind of stuff. So you give yourself some, some space and grace on that aspect as well. But it's a great, yes, I now know, and now I'm going to choose. That's great. That's how you move forward. And I love that you have a sad playlist. I've done that too. And then was also thinking, this is a few years ago, but and it was a really true, I had every reason to be sad. And I did. I gave myself 1 hour Yeah, and then I had to do something different, and I watched, I have a funny movie that I watch, and but like I gave myself 1 hour to lean in, feel the pain and all that, but I had to mark it because otherwise, yeah, I can go into the whole spiral down. So I owned it, I acknowledged it, I leaned into it, and then I, moved on. It still pings back, but on some level, it's just like, okay, now I've processed through that. So, but this is all a journey. This is all a journey. We're doing the best that we can as human beings. We don't know. We're not perfect. Great topic. My partner feels victim of life, even though he has hurt me. How can I support him and letting him gently know that is not helpful? And then also, how can we help someone who is getting dysregulated? How can we co-regulate?
Mm. So, uh, how can you support him in letting him know that that's not helpful? One of the ways to do that is to share what happens to you when he goes into victim mode. Um, he may or may not be open to hearing that, just so you know. But one of the things is, instead of like pointing the finger and saying you're going into victim mode, it's, hey, when I notice that you start to go into that place of pain and feeling like that all this bad stuff has happened to you, I notice that you pull away, and then I can't connect with you. I can't I can't hold on to any of that because you're so small in that moment that I'm not able to I'm not able to connect, and that's hurtful for me, and it makes me really lonely, and I don't want that. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. So being able to share what you experience and how you feel when that happens may or may not open his eyes, but that's a way to do that compassionately and not blamey, if that makes sense. So you may want to sit down and journal a little bit about, well, how do I feel? What happens to me? What does that remind me of? Has that happened in the past? What's a metaphor that I could use to explain what happens when that happens? Um, I can tell you that my best friend Matt, he's a guest here sometimes. Sometimes I get into victim mode, and I'll own it, and will I don't do it on purpose, but I'll lash out. I'll say like barbs and passive aggressive statements. And um he started, like, we were talking the other day, and he's like, can I make mistakes, Troy? Like, can I have grace? Because I feel like I'm really scared to say something and it's gonna piss you off, and then you're gonna throw something at me, and it makes me really scared. He said, I'm struggling too. And I cried first, and I'm like, I didn't know you were struggling. You didn't tell me that. I wanted to blame a little bit. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm so sad that I've done that. I can totally see how I've done that. You are so much more important to me than that. And we were able to talk about it. So his courage to share how that affected him gave me the ability to like see into his pain, and I didn't want to contribute to that. That being said, and I don't know how long your partner's been in recovery, but usually empathy is not a strength that people early on in recovery have. They really do struggle with the ability to, like, they have a hard time seeing their own pain, let alone anybody else's. So as you're sharing that, he might get defensive because he doesn't know what to do with that. Um, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the right and the ability to share your pain and how it affects you. So that's the answer to the first part. When somebody is being dysregulated, that what's happening is that their nervous system is overreacting and it's going into fight or flight response. So for me, when that happens, the first thing I have to do is make sure that I'm grounded, because I've had situations where they're dysregulated and then I immediately get dysregulated too. So first thing is I need to make sure that I'm grounded. That includes taking deeper breaths, dropping my shoulders, unclenching my jaw, softening my voice, because there's this interesting thing that can happen if I can mirror what regulation looks like. It can provide a place for the other person to start doing that too. Second, I can lower the intensity. So I can reduce the volume of my voice. I can talk more softly. I can slow the pace. I can ask some simple questions like, would you like to sit down? Could I get you some water? It looks like you're feeling really overwhelmed. Do you want some space, or do you want me to be here? So just some simple questions, and then don't say a lot. You can just say, I'm here. I can see that this is really hard for you right now. I can see that your heart is hurting. Um, and so just some empathic responses as you are there. And then as they start to ground, then you can go into some other direction that's more helpful.
Thank you for sharing that about you and Matt. And I mean, that's what a real relationship is that you can be, that he was willing to be vulnerable with you, and that was, I'm sure, scary for him, and,
It was.
a moment for you too. But look what happens if we're willing to do that. We grow the relationship. When you're talking about co-regulating, I do support sessions and they're not therapy, but I will have people come on and they are so amped up. I'll say, let's just take a moment and we'll do like, box breathing. And I'll say, we're going to do this together. And then it takes, a minute or two, and then because it'll be like, I need to hear you, but I want, let's just take a moment. And so sometimes it's like, I can see that you're, the emotions are big. I want to be able to hear you. Can we take a moment, and just, do the box breathing together? Okay, now we're okay. Now our breathing is regulated. Okay, now tell me, what's going on. Now I can hear you. They're also more able to, with clarity, share what the situation is. So I find some of that stuff, it's just, like 2 minutes of like, can we do this? Sometimes it's have the conversation when you're not in the moment, but that's in the moment, that's different. But with a partner, it might be, when this happens, I'm wondering if we could try, and I'm thinking this, what about you? Would you be willing to try that? Getting the permission and buy-in when you're not in the moment. Okay, now we're in the moment. Now we've already talked about it and we both agreed that let's try this and see, how that works. My suspicion is, if you're both regulated and able to show up, the conversation's going to, be different. And hopefully both of you will recognize, oh, that was different. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't whatever. We were able to be respectful and hear each other, and, I often say, two smart people, if you're problem solving on the issue, not blaming each other, things can change. So perhaps that would be useful. Other questions? We've got some time here. Monday, we're out of balance here because Monday night we had way too many questions, and now
That's
today we
okay.
have less questions. It's all good.
Yeah.
So,
I can share two things that I teach well, I teach anybody, but I teach the men in particular about this. So this comes from Chris Voss. He is a hostage. He's a retired FBI hostage negotiator, who now does some consulting and other things. You can learn more about him. But if you think about a hostage negotiation, there's a lot of in high emotion going on. Usually there's some hostages, who are at risk of losing their lives. There's high energy, there's a lot of fear, all that stuff. And so he learned some tools that would help intervene in those high hostage, high emotional situations that turns out work really well in marriages and relationships when things are really intense. And two of the things that he teaches are mirroring and labeling. So mirroring is simply reflecting back to the other person what's happening. And I'm going to give you an example. We've learned through neuroscience that there are these things in our brain called mirror neurons. And what we discovered about that is that when we are watching somebody, for example, somebody eating food that we like, our brains will light up as if we were also eating that food. If we notice that someone's sad, our brain will light up the same places that create sadness in ourselves. So we are connected as humans more than we realize. And so that we can use that to our advantage. It's kind of like what we were talking about with dysregulating. If I'm able to regulate myself, the other person will see that and it can light up their brain and help calm things down. But the way that we do mirroring is we simply repeat the last 2 or 3 words that they said. In imago therapy, they use the words like, what I heard you say was, and then whatever. This is a shortcut version of that. And so we don't say what I heard you say. We just say the last 2 or 3 words that they said. So the person will say, you know, let me think. I went to the movie. I went to the movie the other day and I thought it was awful. It was awful? Well, yeah. Like I was really expecting that it was going to be this amazing thing. There were so many people that were like so much hype about it. And then when I got there, it was really disappointing. It was disappointing. Well, yeah, I was really looking for blah, blah, blah. So it sounds really simple. And you might think that the other person is going to catch on that you're really annoying, but they don't. Even when I teach this to couples and they know that they're doing it on each other, it still works. So that's the first thing. So as
So
your
before
husband,
you go on, you're asking that, but you're repeating it as a question. Am I right?
yes, you're
Okay.
saying it that
Yeah.
like, it's like, yeah, so you're kind of inflecting up as
Yes.
so they say the last thing, and then you just kind of say it like it's like a question, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, um, so I'm gonna think about something that you like to talk about in a second, and then we're gonna use it to model. So
Okay.
the second is labeling, and
Hmm.
that is just naming the emotion
Okay.
or naming what it is that you think is happening. So it seems like you're sad. It seems like you're frustrated. It looks like you're feeling really overwhelmed. It sounds like that was really tough. So the words you use are seems like, sounds like, looks like, blank. And so you use those kind of together to build it on. So think about something that you love to talk about or you're passionate about or brings you a lot of joy.
Okay.
And you start it and we'll go from there.
About something that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so it's my two adopted golden retrievers gotcha day today. So we've had them 1 year and they bring me lots of joy and lots of chaos in my life. So I'm I'm celebrating them today.
You're celebrating them today?
We're going to take them out for puppy Sundays later tonight. They've never experienced that, so that will be fun. But I'm also probably going to post on Facebook all of the amazing things that have happened in the past year while we've had them.
It sounds like they have brought you so much joy over the last year.
They have a lot of learning opportunities as well, but they are, yeah, bundles of bouncing golden retriever joy.
So you can ask a question every once in a while. So
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you've learned?
Patience. They came to us and they had zero manners. And so we worked on manners. They did not have leash skills. They were filthy. There was a lot. There's been a lot. And so we've had, each of them have had surgeries of different kinds. And so caring for pets that can't understand, um, like, we're going to do this to you and it's going to help you. They don't understand that. So that's been hard.
It sounds like you didn't get them when they were puppies.
We got them when one was 15 months and the other was 2.5. And so, no, they already had some traits and experiences. The isolation that they experienced makes them not the typical golden retrievers.
Hmm. Not the typical golden retrievers.
Golden retrievers, everyone is your friend. Everybody is like I want to meet you, and they are very shy, very uncertain, very scared. It has taken a lot to work on socializing them, and yeah, so it's different. It's been a lot of work.
I would imagine that you've had to have a lot of patience and um, a lot of love for them to go through all that with them.
We do. And I remind myself often that I'm grateful that the people were willing to surrender them, because that keeps me from being resentful. But I'm also grateful that they have come into our home and given us an opportunity to love on them.
Thank you. So did that feel awkward for you?
No, no, I mean, yes, I knew what you're doing. I knew this was an example, but yeah, no, I mean, I wish that that was all real. So
Yeah. So that's what it looks like. Now, is it harder to do it when the person's mad? Yes. But that's what it looks like. So I tell people, let just try it out. Like, I want you to just
mhm.
practice with all the people that you interact with, like your kids, the the person at the coffee shop, like just when you're talking to somebody, just try it out. Repeat the last couple of words that they said or the main gist of it. When you get better, it's you can pick up something in between, but usually just the last two or three words they say in an up tone, or it sounds like, and then fill in the blank and just see what happens. Just notice what how the other person opens up, what they start to tell you. So that's been really helpful for for the guys that I work with who are really trying to have a they don't know how to show up for their wives. They want to and they're like, I don't know. So we practice a lot and it helps.
Yeah, and I could see that, and if you're doing it, you're being very intentional, and whether the other person knows about it, like you're talking about in a couple's relationship, and you're telling each of them or not, but I knew what you were doing, but still, there's the genuine sharing, and if I'm focused on practicing this technique and paying attention, I'm probably going to stay more grounded because I'm working my thinking part of my brain is engaged, not my, oh my gosh, all I feel is the anger. Like,
Right.
I'm working on getting what's underneath, some of those emotions. So, and
Yeah.
probably a betrayed partner is going to go, wow, like they're being curious about, like, wow, that's different. They're not just shutting me down. That's different.
I one of my clients, he's worked his butt off. I'm so proud of him. And his wife makes it hard. She's had a lot of wounds. But he's become so good at it. And now in group, when we're in group, he uses it on the guys all the time. And I just smile because he's learned how to do it. And so he'll say, it seems like that was really overwhelming for you. And then the guy starts talking and he'll like wink at me because he's learned how to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that is a skill set. And you talked about generally people, that struggle with compulsive behaviors don't have empathy. I'm like, they never do. We never do. We can't. It is you cannot be thinking about your behaviors and be thinking about your loved one. You can't. They have to be separate. So we do not have empathy, and empathy is a higher order skill. Unfortunately, and it's not fair, but partners want, with the stopping of the problematic behaviors, to have this person who's magically well adjusted and everything else. It doesn't happen. This is a process, and like you're talking about, we can learn new skills, we can learn things that work for us, we can learn things that don't work for us or our relationship. But it's all, practicing different things, trying different things, and see what is useful. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Other questions? We have about 15 more minutes. So the video, I will go grab that. The video that was on from Mondays is posted. So if you missed out on Troy's presentation, please check this one out. The continuing will be in a week and a half, and not next Monday, but the following Monday. That will also be posted, but we would welcome you to join us live, ask good questions. They're all good questions. So, is empathy not the same as neural mirror? I can't even say it. Neural mirrors.
Neurons. Yeah. Mirror neurons. No, they're different. So neurons are the things that happen in our brain. They light up. So if we did a brain scan, and you were eating chocolate cake, if that's your favorite thing, we would see parts of your brain that light up. And if you were feeling depressed, we would see other parts of your brain that would light up. So those neurons are electrical impulses that are the brain cells are communicating to each other. And what they discovered, how they discovered mirror neurons was they were in a lab with monkeys, and the monkey had the thing on his brain. And one of the staff members came in and was eating a banana, and then the machine lit up all the parts of the brain where the monkey's brain usually would light up when they were eating the banana. And they started to study that and discovered that happens not to just to monkeys, but to humans too. So that's a biological reaction, like a chemical reaction, electrical impulses in our brain. Empathy is a skill that we learn how to do, just like learning how to play the piano or throwing a ball or any of that stuff. So when we're using empathy, mirror neurons are typically lighting up in our brains, but empathy itself is really the ability to put myself in your shoes and to imagine what that must be like for you. And then to be able to use words to communicate that understanding back to you. The interesting thing about that is the more shame we are drowning in, the higher the inability to have empathy. Because what shame does is make it all about me. I'm bad. I'm horrible. I'm no good. I suck. I'm the worst human on the planet. And when I'm swimming in that, I don't have the mental emotional capacity to even consider what this might mean for you. And so that's why we're saying when somebody who's early on in recovery, oftentimes they're early on in recovery because they got caught. So there's a lot of shame around that, but they've been feeling shame for a long time. They just were pushing it down and trying to pretend it's not there. So now they're having to face it. And they're also seeing the impact that it's having on the world around them. And so they that's a journey for them to come out of that. So as they do, their ability to like actually see your pain will get better. But it's a skill that we learn. It doesn't some some people maybe are prodigies, like they can sit down at the piano and they can do really well with a couple of lessons and they can just go to town. Other people, it takes practice, practice, practice. And it's the same with empathy. Some people, they can do it really well, really fast, and other people it takes time. So they are different.
I never learned empathy, and I have a lot. I think we are born with it, and I'm gonna, yeah. I think you might have had it modeled for you and learned it.
Well, you can be an
babies are not that babies don't have any empathy. Like they
no,
only
they
care about
don't.
themselves. Yeah.
But you can be, I mean, there are people who are called empaths.
Yes.
I happen
Yes.
to be one of them, where you have the ability to feel or pick up on the feelings that other people are experiencing. And those are empaths. That that also isn't the same as empathy. Empathy is what you do with it, right? So I can feel what you're feeling, and then I will either convey that to you. A lot of empaths have to learn how to shut that off
Yes.
because it can be so overwhelming because they can pick up on the energy of so many people that so they have to learn how to kind of manage it. But that is a different experience where you are feeling the connection with other people. Um, so yeah, that's a thing too.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying the difference, with all of those. Okay, the
Yeah.
next question. My husband has ADHD and seems to blank out when I need him the most. Any suggestions? My explanation seems to get him more disturbed.
I'm so sorry. Uh, I think the symptoms of ADHD and the symptoms of addiction overlap so much because it's a dopamine problem. Um, People, when they're in their addiction, regardless of what their addiction is, they're chasing after that dopamine hit. And so, unfortunately, it does mean that the brain starts to be depleted of dopamine, which is also the problem with ADHD. People who struggle with ADHD have lower dopamine levels in their prefrontal cortex, and so they are battling that all the time. And what dopamine does, among other things, is help us stay focused. It helps us be able to make executive decisions. It helps us to regulate our emotions. It helps us to be able to process and organize things. And so when we're depleted with dopamine, it does make it really hard for us to be able to function. So um, my suggestion is, and not necessarily meds, but my suggestion is that he find some ways to be treated for the ADHD. And especially there's a lot of research coming out now that older adults or even people in their 30s and 40s, their ADHD symptoms are getting worse because they have never really been treated before. So it doesn't necessarily mean beds, though that can be one way, but there are a lot of new things that we're learning, different kind of brainwave technology, uh, magnetic, transmatic, magnetic imaging, whatever. They put magnets on your head. There's lots of new things that we're learning help with that too. So if he can be treated for that, because it's a biological condition, like the lack of dopamine is a biological condition that will probably give him the ability then to be able to show up the way he wants to, the way you want him to. So uh, that's what I would suggest is find some ways to be treated for the ADHD.
And I put Candace Christensen, who is an expert on neurodivergence, including ADHD and sex addiction. She did some webinars with us. She also does consultations. She works with people, couples, on that. Dr. Todd Love did a webinar a longer time ago. He's an expert on ADHD and the life expectancy of somebody with ADHD, particularly males, is diminished. And so getting treatment, to help, combat that would be really helpful. But for a lot of people, it's like knowing what it is and knowing here are some things that can help. There's we think differently. Addicts think differently. I have mild ADHD. It's like I have to set up processes so that I don't completely forget to do things. So I know that about myself. Mine is really mild, but for people with more severe, it's like how do you find a system that works for you, and for your partner. So I think that would be important. You may want to check into having a consultation with Candace to see if she has suggestions for how you guys navigate things. Okay. How do you learn and practice empathy?
Um, there's a book that I recommend to people all the time. It's a really simple book. It's called How to Talk to Your Kids So They Will Listen, How to Listen to Your Kids So They Will Talk. It was written in the 80s, and then I think they updated it in the 90s. And it's a book about how to listen to your kids. And it gives some really practical tools and a lot of examples of how to practice empathy. So, how to listen to your kids so they will talk, how to talk to your kids so they will listen. I would recommend that. It's pretty simple.
So I have not heard of that. I'm going to go look into that. But I learned in 12 step, because
Mm,
I had all of these people that were sharing things, and I could go, oh, I hear that, and I would have a feeling in me that resonated with that, and I would go, oh, I can relate to that. I can understand that. It's harder to do in a vulnerable partnership, and again, it's not fair. But empathy with partners is usually the last frontier, because that's the scariest. That's where we've messed up the most. So learning to do it in a safe place, 12 step sponsor, peers, that's where we practice it, and we learn. We learn to not just be all wrapped up in ourselves. So that would be my suggestion. The more group work that somebody is doing that needs to learn empathy, the better, because then we're going to be around people that can teach us. Troy talked about the person in the group that has learned and is now doing it. All of the other people in the group are, experiencing that, with that person as well.
hmm Yeah.
Okay. Next question. How long after being sober should a porn addict test for ADHD? I'm 40 years old, sober 4 months. How accurate is ADHD test? Don't want to get addicted to Adderall unless it's needed.
Well, chances are that you have what we call a core morbidity. Um, a lot of times, people who are struggling with whatever addiction they have some other problems, and they've been using their drug of choice to deal with the discomfort and the pain of whatever it was. So there is a chance that you have both. So it's not going to hurt you to be tested for ADHD. You can actually take even some screenings online for free. That's not going to hurt you. And then there are meds besides Adderall that that can be prescribed. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you that. I will tell you, because I live with a bunch of people who have ADHD, and I've worked with a bunch of people. I had a client who she's in her 40s, and she she finally got diagnosed with ADHD. She had been dealing with depression for so many years. She is in recovery from substance abuse and all that kind of stuff, and so she was a little reluctant to take the ADHD meds. And the cool thing about ADHD meds is that they work within about 30 minutes of you taking it. So it's different than like other drugs. Um, and she texted me and said, "Is this how normal people live? Like I can think clearly. I can focus at work." I'm like, "Yeah, that's." And so when when the medicine is given because it's needed, it's less likely that you're going to become addicted to it because you're using it for what it was for. Um, you're not using it to get high. You're not using it to for pleasure. You're using it to help you function. Um, and it is a controlled substance, so the doctors are pretty reluctant to prescribe it unless you really need it. And you can talk to your doctor about that. Hey, I really don't want to get addicted to that. So it wouldn't hurt you to be tested. And I'm not advocating meds as a way, although that is the number one treatment prescription for it. But there are other ways to be able to deal with it. But even just knowing what it is, there are strategies that you can use to help deal with it besides meds. So you may want to get tested because that may help you understand even more about your addicted behavior.
I often share go to someone who understands both addiction, and ADHD. It's because otherwise they can look very similar. And yeah, medication is one aspect, and like Troy said, just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean you have to take the medication. But it can also be, I'm going to try this for a period of time and see what happens, and I'm going to be very intentional and have accountability around all of it. There's so many ways to do that, but the intensity that we're looking for in our addiction also feeds into the ADHD. So, especially porn addicts, I'm like, oh my gosh, 1,000 images a minute. Well, you don't have to focus on anything, so there can be some lifestyle cleansing, that can also be part of that. Even substances like caffeine, it's like paying attention to what you're doing. Lots of people, are medicating in other ways. So, yeah, but I think having knowledge about what's going on for me and just understanding, go, okay, this is it. I've got a chemical imbalance, and therefore this is how I'm going to handle it. Could be really useful for you. But good job on I appreciate 4 months of sobriety. Great.
Awesome.
One day at a time, it adds up, and things start to change. And thank you for being here and asking that question. So we're out of time. Thank you so much, Troy. Thanks for all the great questions, everybody. Join Troy, not next Monday, but the following Monday. Dr. David Fawcett is joining me next Monday, and he will talk about co-occurring, substance and sex porn addiction. Bye, everyone.
Bye.